Introduce yourself to our audience.
I'm doing all right, man. I'm Josh Eakle. I'm the state chair of the Libertarian Party of Tennessee, lptn.org. And I met these two guys, what was it, the radio days? Back in radio days when you guys were doing real news at Knoxville Talk Radio, 92.3 FM. There's my cat in the background. But yeah,
nice.
man. That's me. Libertarian Party of Tennessee. That's who I'm here to represent this afternoon.
So let me ask this. You're obviously with Libertarian Party right now. Being that this is an Americans for Prosperity sort of pitch function / broadcast that we're doing, how did you come to be a part of Americans for Prosperity or work with us or get involved in what we're trying to do?
I think my first introduction to Americans for Prosperity was I was put in as chair of the Knox County Libertarian Party several years ago, back in like 2016. And at the time, I think James Amundsen was out of the Knoxville office, and he was working out of there representing AFP. It was like 2017. I think he came to the local LP meeting and gave us a talk. It was about, I want to say it was about the gas tax. It may have been about a couple things, but I do remember we had several talks about the gas tax. That was the first time where I think AFP and that local chapter of the Libertarian Party really worked together on an issue. It was fighting the gas tax at the time. And that was my introduction, man. Been friends ever since.
I always love it too, man, when different organizations have what I like to call sort of a symbiotic overlap, right? Where my issues work for your issues and our organizational issues work for your organizational issues. And
synergy, Yeah,
synergy. Absolutely.
It's a beautiful thing.
It is a beautiful thing. Speaking of that in particular, man, the topic we're talking about tonight, as far as federal government rejecting or bailing out state governments, there's a myriad of things I suppose you can bring up. What is top in your mind as to why that's a bad idea?
I don't know. I'd probably break it down to 3 issues, man. So, the first thing is all it does, when you look at a bailout, all it does is encourage fiscal irresponsibility because, it basically rewards states that have long-term fiscal, just a terrible fiscal policy, deficit spending out the ass, just debt out the wazoo, while other states that have been intentionally responsible and watched their budget and made sure that they had smart taxation policies. I mean, they don't need the help. They're the ones paying. They're the ones footing the bill. So, I mean, in the long term, it encourages these states to continue their bad practices, because if they know that the daddy federal government's going to come in and bail them out every time they have a problem, what's the incentive to change? What's the incentive to get that budget balanced? So that'd be the first thing. I think the second thing, it goes back to what I said a second ago. I mean, I don't think that Tennessee Tennessee's a great state that is fiscally responsible, that takes care of their budget, that has a really great taxation system. But Tennessee taxpayers should not be footing the bill for decades of mismanagement in New York or California or Illinois. I mean, I don't think anyone would disagree with me on that. If your state's been responsible, you should not be on the hook for a state that has been out of control for decades. And then I think the last thing is a very libertarian thing. I mean, the third issue, the thing that really stresses me out the most is when the government comes in and bails out your state, it gives the federal government so much oversight and so much control over how the state operates after that bailout. And I'm not one to want to increase the size and power of the federal government in any regard, especially as it pertains to giving them more power over state budgets and state legislatures. They need to stay out of it. And so, I mean, honestly, those are kind of my 3 reasons that I'd say it's probably a bad idea.
Man, I'll tell you one that really hits home for me too is that last one that you mentioned there of like bailouts in general, but especially this one. Bailouts in general, but especially this one, are a great example of the federal government overstepping its authority, right? I mean, I don't know how you get back to that sense of rhetoric. I don't know how you get back to that basic notion other than what do you just count? Can we just push back closer to about 240 years ago? I don't know if you have to dumb it down that much to Civics 101 every single time you pitch something like this. I hope not, because It should be something that's ingrained within the very fabric of the foundations of this country. You know what I'm saying, man?
Yeah.
Like, I personally think this is a personal opinion. You get rid of the 17th, you empower the 10th Amendment, you solve a lot of problems here, pushing power back to the states. And this one in particular, that was, again, just my personal opinion.
It does the opposite of that. Right.
That's what I'm saying, right? It just shifts power right back into the federal government. The bailouts, in some people's assessment, attorneys have been talking about this at least since 2011. This is not the first time that we've had this issue brought up, by the way, y'all. And this same thing with the exact same states since 2011, California and Illinois were used as the case examples in a Stanford symposium about this very issue. whether states could claim bailouts or not. And in that symposium in 2011, they brought up this whole idea of like, dude, these bailout proposals, they could potentially allow the federal government to exert control over state spending for decades to come.
Right.
That terrifies me, bro. Because
Yeah.
like, look, it's Trump today. I don't know who it could be tomorrow. I'm not sure. But that's the thing, man. It's exactly what you just said is how much control do we really want the federal government to have over state spending? Is that right? And one size fits all is never going to work for anybody.
No, I couldn't have said it better myself. The federal government, the more they get involved, usually the more they screw things up. And in this situation, I think it's a lot better for these states to adjust their fiscal policy, to get their spending under control, in order to get it through this crisis rather than get bailed. I mean, it's the same reason why we opposed the massive, at least the Libertarian Party opposed the massive corporate handouts through the CARES Act. That was only a month ago. Because what does it do? You know, it encourages companies that have had bad policies, or states in this example, to just continue to operate business as usual and change nothing. And that's in the long term, that's a bad proposition, brother.
Can I ask you an honest question here, man? This is slightly unrelated to the topic at hand tonight. By the way, sign a pledge at the top of the description of this stream right now. Share this stream. Hashtag reject bailouts for anything that you want to do with this. Here's the honest question, just between friends. Dude, we're sitting on 24.5 trillion for national debt right now. And now another trillion of that debt has just been in the last month alone. And that's not even including CARES Act 2.0, which is on its way, just so y'all realize. CARES Act 2.0 is coming down the road. That's like another $2 trillion. Some experts are saying we're looking close to $30 trillion in the next few years. Yeah. Josh, honest, does anybody care about this debt thing anymore?
Okay, so I mean, this is my big thing, man. I mean, the reason that I left the GOP and went into a scrappy party like the Libertarian Party and said that I have to dedicate my life and dedicate my time to this cause is because of that. Because when you look at the Republican Party, when you look at the Democratic Party, and you look at the way that they've acted in the last 30 years, there is no advocate for fiscal responsibility. The irony to me is that I can't remember where it was, a Hill article or maybe it was MSNBC put out an article talking about Trump's comments regarding the state bailouts issue, and Trump was trashing these states, calling them names because they had, quote, tremendous debt and terrible policy. When you look at the federal government under his leadership, in the last quarter, we've spent $3 trillion. The deficit has not decreased a cent since he took office in 2016. And Republicans, at least for the last 3 decades, have been virtue signaling to voters about, we need to have a balanced budget. We need to reduce the debt. Donald Trump himself promised before he went into office that he would eliminate the debt in 8 years. I mean, obviously idealistic and crazy, but that pisses me off to no end, man, because again, not to get on a rant, but when it comes to surveillance, spending, and war, both the parties agree and walk lockstep with each other every single year.
And dude, I'm telling you, man, I that's one of the reasons why I so appreciate the motto of Americans for Prosperity, the Frederick Douglass quote of uniting with anyone to do right and no one to do wrong, right? And to me, it speaks to this issue of like, yeah, okay, I guess you could just call that basic bipartisanship, but it's so much more than that. Right. It has become this thing now of the sort of inability to distinguish between two party lines. You get almost not just this fatigue, but like political nihilism, bro. Like I kind of get done with it sometimes. Right. Because I don't see functional difference between the two. And in a crisis like this, it seems like both sides might be as capable of exploiting this situation as the other one is. On the one hand, you get sort of corporate bailouts or cronyism or corporate welfare, whatever you want to call it. And on the other hand, you get terrible spending policies, which work yourself up into this situation of like, dude, now you're bailing out to the tunes of tens of billions of dollars for an unfunded pension fund, bro.
Yeah,
it's up on both sides. I don't know where to turn. So with something like this, I know what it kind of sounds like I'm pitching this dire thing, but I think what I hope I can impart to everyone else, and I'll leave you with the last word here as we get our next guest ready, is this could possibly be something that has some of the biggest bipartisan support behind it in at least our generation, right? You and I are about the same age, man. Right? This is something that will affect everyone across every single state. And one of the worst things that we can do, or so our founders told us, is impart those burdens onto future generations. No?
No. I couldn't have said it better myself, man. Completely on point. And what AFP does by reaching across party lines and looking at the issues and not the party is so important to keep fighting this. So again, if you're a libertarian tuning in, because I know we shared this across our libertarian pages across the state of Tennessee, check out that form. Make sure you get your name on there. We need to make sure that people know we're not going to put our money on the line to bail out states that have been irresponsible for decades. And I appreciate what you guys are doing.
All right, thank you so much, Josh.
No problem,
Shining.
guys.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and